Well, good morning, everybody, at least in my time zone. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Let me get my screen shared out here. Perfect. In
And
case you're wondering if you're in the right spot, this is
great,
building a template for success.
cool. And just while we wait for the rest of the audience to come in, um, I just would like to ask everyone: have you discovered the wonders of custom metadata and flows together, and what they can do? So for this session, we have the lovely Michelle Hansen to tell us all about it. So good day, Michelle. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. Now, just for starters, and so as to not take from your presentation, just have a couple questions.
Mhm.
So, number one, if you're not helping out the Salesforce community at large, what would you be doing on your free time?
Oh my goodness. I can't actually imagine a life where I don't help out the Salesforce community in my free time. I imagine I would probably be wrangling several of my feline brigade, one of whom has decided to join me here on my desk. You'll see a tail fairly often. I also have a tendency to like reading, board games, trivia, all kinds of fun things like that. So that's probably what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this, but can't imagine
Cool,
not.
cool. Board games are great. My kids and my wife, we enjoy that. All right, next one. If anyone here in the audience today haven't started using flows yet, what would you tell them?
Well, there's no time like the present. There's tons of resources out there to help you get started. I'm going to shamelessly plug the biweekly webinar that I co-host, Automation Hour at automationhour.com. We do basically guest users come in and present in every episode with the cool solutions that they have built, featuring some form of automation. So, Mark, thanks for throwing that in the chat. Also, I know Mark has done some great courses and presentations on it. I'm actually presenting in 3 hours from now to an Arkansas
Wow.
user group with an introduction to Flow and Flow Builder. So I do that as well, and there's a number of wonderful people in the ecosystem who have put together some really good content to try and help people learn Flow. So it's really just about finding someone who has an appropriate teaching method for your learning style. And
Mhm.
trust me, it takes a while, but there will come a day when it clicks, and it's
Mhm.
amazing when it does.
Lovely, lovely. Well, all right then, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Michelle Hansen.
Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone. So, as Erwin mentioned, we're going to talk about custom metadata and flow, and we're going to talk about it in the context of how you can use this to create record templates. So, you might be wondering, okay, record templates, why? There's a lot of good reasons for that, depending. And I have a use case that I wanted to basically bring to kind of show the power of it and see if it helps you jumpstart your thinking on options that you might want to use this for. So a little bit about me. I am terribly involved in the ecosystem. Two-time Salesforce MVP, received a Golden Hoodie at Dreamforce this year, which was amazing. I co-lead a user group in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Like I mentioned, I co-host Automation Hour. I'm on the planning committee for Midwest Dreamin. I absolutely love being involved in the ecosystem and helping people learn. So today, what we're going to cover is my use case and background for the client that I was working with. Um, an overview of what custom metadata is. If you don't have a clue what it is, that's cool. We'll talk about it, and it's important that you know what it is so you can use it. And then we'll actually talk about how we did this in the flow, and I'll step you through the flow, at least a reasonable level. I don't know that we'll get way into the nitty gritty with the time we have today. All right. So the use case I had is I was working for a software company, and our software was pretty darn customizable and flexible. It was for utility and telecom companies to be able to run their business. The easiest way for me to explain it would be it was almost like Salesforce, but very specifically tailored to telecom and utility companies. So they had essentially a CRM for you to be able to track your customers. There were additional modules to help with service. So, the people who come to your house and install your cable or turn on your electricity, the people who troubleshoot it when there's problems, everything from that to we had our own web and mobile app for you to log on and review your account. So, enterprise software suite. Part of it was there was a lot of moving parts for us to track in the sales cycle, and to make sure that they got into the contract. So some of the things that we ran across most often were special requests. Just like Salesforce, the software couldn't do everything, wasn't designed to do everything. So we needed to be able to integrate with other applications. So certainly we needed to track that, make sure that we already had. If we hadn't, were there APIs available for us to build that integration to? A lot of companies do the same things, just a little bit differently. So we needed to make sure that we could develop for them custom anything that they desperately needed for how they ran their business that maybe we hadn't put into our software yet. A lot of times these would actually become parts of our software in the future, kind of like the AD exchange. Then also our sales cycles were long. I'm talking 18 months, 2 years in some cases. And so we wouldn't necessarily know everything up front. And as we continued to do demos and have discovery with them, we would figure out more that needed to go into the final contract. So making sure that we could track missing information for further along in the sales cycle, once we were ready to start getting to quoting, was very important. So there were a lot of things that we needed to keep track of. So they came to me and they said, okay, we would love to start tracking all of this stuff. And I said, okay, sounds great. We'll create an object for you to specifically track that. And so we knew certain things, certain pieces of software that we sold always needed to have certain follow-up done. And so they started creating a master spreadsheet of, if you sell product X, you need to ask this. If you sell product Y, you need to ask this. And we need to create these records. We called them SOSs, things that they needed help on, but it was actually services outside of standard. So anything that we needed kind of that wasn't just standard run of the mill went into this object. But again, they started with a spreadsheet. And as we all know, spreadsheets are the enemy of Salesforce. It was incredibly hard to keep version control. And then, of course, everyone would grab their own copy, download it, and quickly it became out of date. So version control was a huge issue. Also, it got big really fast. I think we started out with probably 6 or 7, and then probably within a month or two, we were up above 50. So trying to keep track of all 50 of these, having the right spreadsheets, again, we're starting to run into some challenges. And then finally, they were creating these records by hand. So even though I gave them an object in Salesforce to do it, I said, absolutely, you can track all these things here, build whatever you need for your particular opportunity. It got a little time consuming when there was 50. I don't know if you've ever tried to create 50 individual records, but it was taking them an hour or two on every single deal. And then they would have to keep them updated as we went through the sales cycles. And our sales team quickly said, I don't have time for this. So we said, all right, we need to do a few things. What can we look at doing to help make this easier? Well, this was their idea. Can't you just do this for us? Like, why do we need to do this? We already have all this information. We know what we need. Why don't you just make them? And I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm a one-person department. I don't really have time for that. Also, I don't necessarily know what you need on every deal. And things are changing pretty quick. And if you want me to spend all my time making your records, I cannot do the other 735 things that are on our list of to-dos. Just a thought. So I put on my thinking cap and I came up with this record template plan. And so some people would say, well, if you need records and they already exist and you know what they are, why don't you just clone them, right? We've cloned a sheet, clone a record. Can't be that hard. And we ran into a few problems with that too. So again, this was for my sales team to enter their requirements, things that they needed to validate, follow up on, get buy-in from our implementations department or our development department. So the one thing I definitely don't want is sales deciding on the price tag for custom development. That should be something that our development team does. Our project managers, are able to review and talk with our prospective client and make sure that they're putting together a time and materials estimate on what this is actually going to cost. So we had some field level security. Sales is not allowed to put in the price for custom development. Otherwise, they'll put in $0, get that sale through, and it's going to be a whole mess. Same thing with some of our other contract requirements. If they wanted to offer discounts, those needed to be approved. If we wanted to offer special payment terms, our finance department needed to be on board with that, and they needed to grant approval. So you couldn't clone a record from an old opportunity because it would already be approved, and that would just break the whole process of checks and balances. Also, like I said, this changed fast. I mean, we went from 6 to 50 in a couple of months. Well, as we continued to do implementations of our software, our implementations team would come back to us and say, hey, we learned a lot on this last one. We have several other things that we need to follow up on that we needed you to do in the sales cycle. Or we'd ask you to get this information. It's not really relevant. Instead, can you ask this? By the way, here's a sheet that we have for you to fill out. So again, the data would change. And if I cloned one from an opportunity 6 months ago, it would have out-of-date data. Or if we had staff changes, the subject matter expert that they were supposed to reach out to may be different as people moved around in the organization or came and left. So again, cloning records, not a great idea. And finally, I didn't have a good way to handle duplicate management. So the way we built this is we didn't do quoting in Salesforce. Instead, we had all of our quoting outside of the system, and it was handled by our sales operations group. So attached to every opportunity was a custom object called proposal request that the sales team would fill out with the information that they had and send over to sales ops to actually build that proposal. So as you can imagine, going through a sales cycle of 18 months or 2 years, we would send out several different proposals, especially as we learned more. They had demos, they decided they wanted some additional software. So all of these requirements that we were gathering, these SOSs, were actually tied to the proposal that they came from instead of the opportunity at large. So because of that, I couldn't do duplicate management to see if I had the same SOS being created on 2 different proposals related to the same opportunity. So with that, I had a challenge with duplicate management that I needed to figure out as well. So for all of these reasons, I said, okay, cloning records is not going to work. I actually had one of my users go around me anyway, create a dummy account, a dummy opportunity, and a dummy set of these that he was trying to clone from. We had to nip that in the bud because it did more harm than good over the long haul. All right, so we totally missed the custom metadata section in here. We're going to do this live in a demo. So for those of you who aren't familiar with custom metadata, essentially it is a setup object that is available for you to build kind of like records in, but they're not records or objects that you expect your users to touch. It's things for the system, for the admins to use to control exactly how your org should function. So let's hop over into our org. All right, so if we go into setup and I go into custom, I usually type in meta, this is going to give me custom metadata types. So if I click into this page, we're going to see that I've actually set up several in my dev org here. But the one that we're going to look into today is this requirements template. So we can create it. If I come in here to new custom metadata, it's going to look terribly similar to creating a new custom object. You're going to give it a label, the plural label, decide whether or not it starts with a vowel sound. We're going to give it that API name, that object name, and of course a description. Now, the biggest part about custom metadata is this visibility down here at the bottom. Now, most of the time, custom metadata is used by developers. It's something that admins aren't real familiar with. Like, we're always just kind of like, all right, we're not going to touch that. That's developer stuff. But really, it's great for us too. And so what I always choose here is this all Apex code and APIs can use this type, and it's visible in setup. That's the key. If it's visible in setup, then we as admins can access, use it, and modify it as we need. So this is where I'm always picking this first option here. So again, just like a custom object, right? So let's hop in to our requirements template. And so you'll be able to see that I've created this custom metadata object, just like I'd create a custom object that we would expect our users to use. And it comes with some standard fields: created by, the name of the record, the label. So this is like your API name, your developer name. Your label would be like the record name that you always see on a page. Last modified by, and then this namespace prefix and this protected component thing. That's generally used more in managed packages and with code. So I've never actually touched these, but they're there and available for use if needed. Then I was able to create all of the custom fields that I needed. So for example, I was able to pull or create different fields, checkboxes, pick lists, text areas, all of the different things that I might need to be able to handle what I need to track for this particular object. And so for our use case today, what I did is I basically created parallel fields, almost like twin fields in CPQ, if you're familiar with those, to what I was creating on the object itself. So I'm going to come in here and open Object Manager. And we're going to pull up our requirements object. So the requirements object is what I'm actually expecting my users to interact with. And so if we look here at fields, we have several that are different, but we have several that are actually the same. So custom development costs, custom development hours. Does it impact pricing? Does it impact contract language? I have the name, the resolution comments, our SME, our status, our topic. And you'll see a lot of these same things over here: requirement name, SME, status. Does it impact pricing? Does it impact the contract language? So this is how I began to build my record template. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to build in custom metadata all of these fields that mimic the fields in my requirements object. From here, once I've created this custom metadata type, I create records within it. Again, just like we're creating records in a custom object that our users would interact with, but instead, these are for me to be able to set those basically dynamic default values is what it comes down to. But you can't really do dynamic default values with just the default value field in setup for the object manager. So things that we know every time we sell this product, we need to follow up. I was able to create a record for with those values. So for example, if we come in here to special contract terms, if I open this one, I can see that I've built essentially what looks like a custom object record. So I have a label and I have the API name for special contract terms. I've been able to determine which types of sales, which clouds it actually applies to. So does this apply to sales or service or revenue cloud or experience cloud? It can be any of them. Which department is responsible for reviewing or approving these? And I was able to create this as a pick list. So I chose legal for that. Because things change so frequently, I actually pulled in an inactive checkbox to make sure that if I wanted to save this, or if they decided to hold off on one of these, I wanted to build them in advance. If I knew something was coming, I can mark it as inactive and not actually display it to my users through my flow. So then the requirement name is what's actually going to show up on my requirements record, which may or may not be the same as my label. So then I have a description here, and this is kind of the meat. So this is actually showing what is going to populate in here as instructions to my users for what they need to do to follow up on this. So if there's a special contract term that was requested by the customer, this text needs to be replaced so it can be reviewed by the sales manager. So our sales reps are out there. They know they want to give a custom discount or custom contract terms. They're going to put those in here. Then we can have the subject matter expert that is going to review this. And then I have this topic. This topic is actually a pick list that lives on the requirements object for me to be able to do my duplicate management. So then I also have checkboxes for does this impact pricing or contract language? Special contract terms, it's not going to impact our pricing. It's specifically just around language in the contract. So maybe instead of being lump sum payments, we're going to do, a payment plan over certain months, or they're going to be billed in advance as opposed to, invoicing them on a monthly basis. So whatever we need to do here, we can. So one of the other ones that we'll take a look at, because we're going to use this, is we're going to pull up the Conga integration one. So if we look at our Conga integration, anytime that we want to sell this, they need an document generation or possibly Conga sign. We need integration with that. So we want to make sure that anytime they can do this, which this applies to Sales, Service, and Revenue Cloud. This doesn't necessarily apply to Experience Cloud for our purposes. So Sales Ops is going to have to get involved with this. It's Conga integration. So we want to know which pieces of Conga that we are going to set up for them. So is it Composer, Grid, Conga Contracts, Conga Sign? We have a SME in here who is our SME with in-house. So if we have questions on, can we do this? They have this special request. Are we missing anything? Ryan's the person to talk to. And again, because this is additional software from a third party, it's going to impact pricing and also contract language, because they're going to have to agree to whatever terms Conga requires, as well as whatever we agree to or require them to agree to. Okay, so this is custom metadata. It's almost exactly like a custom object with a few small differences. Because it's metadata and not data, you can actually transfer this with change sets. It's deployable. So change sets, or if you're using some sort of deployment packaging or something like GearSet or Capato, these can be packaged up and moved between orgs. So you're not using data loader for this. Now, the thing about it being metadata and not data, you also can't report on this because you can't report on metadata through Salesforce UI. There are a few things that you can do with things like VS Code or Workbench to pull this information out. But if you're looking for a way to report on it, that's not as easy as just building a custom report type and doing it, which I found out the hard way when I started using it for the first time. Whoops. But the nice thing about this is also it comes over with your sandbox refreshes or your sandbox creation because it's metadata. So all of these records that you need to be able to control how certain things work are already going to be there. You don't need to data load this in. So it's much easier and more efficient for you to be able to do that. Plus, if you're low on space for your custom objects, it won't burn a custom object for you to house this information. Certainly, that would be an option if you wanted to build all this into a custom object and reference it that way. But for me, custom metadata made a whole lot more sense. All right, so now that we have chatted about what custom metadata is, let's take a look at the flow that we're using to actually build this. So I actually have this as an opportunity screen flow for my requirement selection. And so what we do if we open this is, try and zoom out just a tad here. We start the screen flow, and the first thing I do is I pass in record ID so I can get the opportunity that we've accessed this from. Then what I do is I go and I get any existing requirements. And so this is how I'm managing my duplicate management, essentially, because I decide if I have any existing requirements that exists, and I set them to a number. So I've done a get, I have a collection, quite possibly, at least of one if I found something, and I set that number to this variable. After that, I make a decision on which cloud do I need to actually display all of the available requirements options for. So again, this goes back to our custom metadata record on applies to sales, applies to service. This is where I want to make sure I understand what type of opportunity we have so that I can display the appropriate ones. And then I use a get record to go and collect out of my custom metadata type all of the records that are applicable. So you can't pick something that is like Conga if you're doing an Experience Cloud opportunity. So then I set a collection variable. And so this tells me how many potential requests I can have from that. So now I know all of the ones that are available. I've gotten them. I've put them into a collection variable. Then I have a screen that says, okay, here's a list of requirements that you can choose from. It's just a set of checkboxes, and we'll go through and I'll show you how this works. And then once they've selected those, I actually start setting up a list of requirements to create. So for every one, I go through and I determine if I should create this requirement or not. And if I should, then I add this to the selected list. And so again, this is keeping track of what I've already created and making sure that I don't create duplicates. So then after I have a list of the ones that I need to create that they've selected, I go through and I confirm whether an existing requirement already exists. So if there is an existing requirement that matches, then I remove the duplicates. I reset my checkbox within my flow here that I'm checking against to determine whether or not that should get added to the list. And so then we go through here and we determine whether or not we have found a duplicate based on topic. And if I have not found a duplicate existing requirement based on topic, I add it to my list to create. And so once I've done this, I come back up here. Everything that's been selected that should be created gets an assignment. And then we actually build our requirements records. And to do that, I'm pulling the information from that custom metadata record that I got for each one, and I am assigning it to a new requirements record. Then after that, I'm adding that to a collection so I can create them all at once. So then finally, we'll create these requirements, and then we'll have a success screen. So it's a lot going on behind the scenes in a flow. If anybody really wants to dig into this, I'd be happy to take you through it step by step at another time. But what I really want to do to make sure we have enough time for questions is kind of show you how this works in the wild. So we'll pull up an opportunity here. And so I have an opportunity that is for Service Cloud. So because this is Service Cloud, this is important to note because when I come up here to my button to launch my screen flow, this is going to give me a list of all of my potential requirements that are available for Service Cloud. So again, if I come back over here to my custom metadata type, I can see everything that applies to service. So Adobe, Conga, but not CPQ licenses, custom discounts, but not a custom QCP integration. We're also missing experience licenses. So if we look at this list that applies to sales in our custom metadata record, you'll notice that it's an exact copy here of the available things to check. So you'll also notice over here that 2 requirements already exist. I'm actually going to close out of this so we can look at this. We have Adobe Sign and integration with Conga. Both already selected. I already know those are things that they want. They already have Adobe Sign, but they need document generation. We're going to go with Conga for that. So we've already created those 2 requirements. So those still show up in my list. I don't have it quite sophisticated enough to go, oh, hold on, these already exist. We're not going to create new ones. But what I can do is say, if you pick them again, I'm not going to create new ones for you. I'll just leave the ones that are already there. So for now, I'm going to say, okay, we need Conga. We're going to need a custom discount here. They want us to help them with single sign-on. And we actually want some special contract terms for them as well. So I've selected 4 of these, one of which already exists. So I'm actually expecting, if this works correctly, for us to have 5 requirements when we're done. The 2 that existed, and then the 3 new ones, and not a duplicate for the Conga integration. So once I've selected these, this is all I need to do, is just click on these and say, these are the ones that I want to create. So it goes through everything in the background. It gives me this requirements were successfully created. I'm going to close this window. And now all of a sudden, we have 5 requirements. So again, if we look at these, we've got the Adobe Sign integration, the Conga integration, and I'm just going to open a couple of these in their own windows so we can take a look at them. So first of all, that Conga integration, you can see that this was created yesterday. So I did this well in advance just to make sure that we had some existing ones to be able to show. And so that did not get recreated today on the 11th after I did this on the 9th. So if we go and we look at our special contract terms, it's got everything that we wanted in here. If we remember looking at this, if we pull up our custom metadata, let me see if I can find the right one here. All right, so custom special contract terms. If we come in here to our special contract terms and we look at this back and forth, we can actually see that our name, special contract terms, the description, special contract terms have been requested. So we've got this assigned to legal. We have the description, we have the requirement name, and then we did all the rest of it where we associated it to the appropriate opportunity and account. We've actually named these with the account number in there for space. Account names got super long, and we do have that 80 character limit in the name field. So this is a 5-digit, can always do it. So that's how we name these. And so if you're looking at a giant list, you can tell kind of what belongs to what. And then we've been able to pull in the SME. We can pull in an origin based on the fact that this was, pulled from the opportunity itself. It's in sales qualification. If you wanted, you could do this on demos. You could have this be from a proposal, discovery sessions, whatever makes sense for you there. And then the status field. So we start with it in identified status, and then it'll move through different statuses as we talk to the customer, as we talk to our department internally. So again, once this gets approved, we'll be able to update the status here. There will be resolution comments that we'll put in terms of, yes, we've agreed to these specific contract terms. Here's what they are. Here's who approved them. And again, because I'm an admin, I have the ability to update these fields, but our sales team would not have the ability to update, custom development costs or hours. So, all right, if I remember correctly, we've got about 9 minutes left. So I'm going to hop over to the presentation once again and just go through the last little bits here. Looks like I'm going to be updating my slides before I give them to the team because my resources slide totally did not make it in the deck. So I totally apologize for that, but I will definitely get you the resources slide. There's so much more to learn about this. So resources on custom metadata, resources on flows, all those things will be in here to help you on your journey forward with this. But for now, we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Well, thanks again, Michelle. That was definitely, well, someone said automatically. So that was beautiful. That's showing us the magic of flows, really. So I'm excited to get things running on flow and custom metadata, and definitely I will be rewatching this video to get a little more tips on what you did back there because that was just beautiful. All right, so just going to the chat here. I'm seeing many thanks, many appreciation. Uh, oh yeah, there was just Vicky's just saying, can we add resources into the description of the YouTube recording too? So yeah, probably add it there as well.
Absolutely. And so record types, default values for records based on certain scenarios is only one use case for custom metadata. Another one that I really like that I've used before is routing for emails or things like that. Or if you get too complicated for assignment rules, that's also a good way to use custom metadata. So
Mm.
I've actually built a custom metadata object where if you need to send notifications to someone about something that happens, and it's like, for example, if you have cases that are sitting still in new status or in a queue for more than half an hour, and you want to make sure that those are getting assigned out to the right people, or if you have leads that haven't been touched since they came in 2 or 3 days ago, you can actually build a custom metadata object that says we have unconverted leads or, unassigned cases. And you can determine in there, you can set that as kind of your name of your record, and then you can set in an email address, first and last name, even a user ID if you want to, into that custom metadata, and then use a flow that says, all right, I'm going to start the clock ticking when a case gets created. If 30 minutes go by and it's still a new status, I'm going to email our support manager and let them know so they can go in and assign it or reach out to one of their people and have them take it. And this is also really nice because if you think about how to do this otherwise, there's nothing necessarily that says this one person should be the person being emailed on a user record. Now, sure, you could create a field for that on your user record. Are you going to create a checkbox? Well, we're going to need at least 3 checkboxes if we have one for cases, one for unconverted leads, and one for stale opportunities. But what happens if the same person should get both leads and opportunities? Multiple checkboxes? You can move to a pick list, but then you only have one. If you need more than one, we get into that dreaded multi-select pick list. Sorry, I said it. So again, instead, you can use custom metadata to do that mapping, keep your user object cleaner, And it also gives you the ability to enter in data that's for someone who's not even a part of Salesforce. But if they aren't a user and you want to notify them about something, with custom metadata, you pull that information in and then you just leverage it wherever it's appropriate in your flow. So lots of great things you can do with custom metadata. If you need to map things, so for example, everybody knows countries, right? But what if we want to break those countries into regions? You've got country and state pick lists in Salesforce, but you
Mm.
don't have anything like a country to region. So if you can build out mapping that gives every country a record and assigns it to a region, then anytime you create a new opportunity, if you want that region to be on there for reporting purposes, you can run a flow that will go look up your custom metadata, find that country, locate the region field next to it, and populate that right in. And it saves you from having a crazy long, probably, but maybe not since they updated the limits on formula. You don't have to have this crazy long formula field that captures all, several hundred countries with their assigned region. So
Interesting.
Mark
Uh,
Jones, I cannot believe that you said that. Your end users have multi-select pick lists. You have not trained them appropriately or scared them enough. I'm not sure which.
yeah. I that Those examples just got me to thinking back to a project that we had started like a year or two back, and it was working on cases, and there were so many factors in the cases that the out of the box assignment rule just could not do it. And the guys that, well, they ended up developing some code to do the assignment of the cases. But back then there were just like 500 combinations of say types of cases, but now the number has grown, and it really needs a solution that's scalable. And I'm looking at what you're saying, and we could probably consider custom metadata and flows to do a better job at that and making it more scalable. So that's definitely interesting. Looking at the chat, yep, nothing but appreciation here. No questions. Um, cool.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
we all have your socials on this last slide. So please expect that people will be knocking your door and sending requests to connect, uh,
Love
myself
it.
included.
Love it. If you would just include that we met on Automation Dreamin', that would be fantastic. It helps me kind of figure out where our connection is.
Yep.
But yeah, I honestly do mean it. If you've got questions, if you want to kick around some ideas, or you have some ideas on maybe how you think you want to use it, but you're not quite sure.
Mhm.
Honestly, that's how I learned. I went to a presentation on it. I'm like, this is super cool. Did the trailheads on custom metadata, finished them, and I was 100% confused, going, done all the trailheads, and I had no idea how to use this. So some amazing members of the Ohana, actually Jennifer Lee, who now works
Mhm.
at Salesforce, hopped on the phone with me and said, tell me what you're trying to do. And so I explained it. She actually sat with me on the phone in a dev org and we built it together, and
Wow.
it made it click. And so I
Wow.
would be more than happy to help others, do the same thing. Mark threw a great trail mix in the chat for custom metadata. So
Mhm.
we'll make sure that we include that as well. But yeah, no, I absolutely mean it.
Mhm.
Please reach out. I'd be happy to help. And I'm just so grateful that y'all are here and attending. And of course, Mark, Vicky, Erwin, and the rest of the volunteers, thank you so much for putting on this fantastic event. I'm thrilled to be a part of
Great.
it.
Great. Well, don't you just love the Ohana? Cool. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. And again, a copy of the recording of this automagical, beautiful, fantastic session will be made available once everything gets put on YouTube. So, thank you again, everyone. And I think we're off to a quick break, then on to our next session. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks again for coming.
Bye.